I think it is a fair jump, and I think what companies like Cumulus are finding out, what the president's finding out with truck drivers and other folks, right, is that people can still walk. This is still a country where you can go somewhere else and you can work. And as long as that's an option, then, Cumulus is going to make their decision. I'll make my decision. And, I don't argue so much about whether they have the authority to do it. I think it's wrong.
I might argue if they have the authority.
Yeah.
So the way they put this is your job or a jab. Should there be a mandate saying you got to get your vaccine if you want to earn a living? And by the way, with so much welfare, why earn a living anyway? Jeff Crank's been a friend for a long, long time. Good to see you, Jeff.
Good to see you too, John.
All right, so you're with an evil organization called Americans for Prosperity. You don't actually work in the Colorado area, but you work
correct
all over the place.
Yes.
But you're a Coloradan.
Right, I am. Yeah, born and raised in Colorado and live in Colorado Springs.
Those terrible telecommuters.
That's right.
All right, we have something in common that we both have a fascination with talk radio.
Yes.
I've done it professionally for 23 years or something. Right. And you young whippersnackers always think you can,
right.
just jump in front of a thing and when it's an art, man.
It is an art.
So how long have you been doing talk radio down in Springs?
Well, I started kind of guest hosting, and probably 20 years if you include that, but 13 years I've been doing my own show.
You have a weekend show?
Weekend show, Saturday morning, 7 to 9.
When everyone's asleep.
Well, I think they're starting to wake up. That's good radio time. When were you on, John? Come on now.
I was on late at night when people were having parties and driving home.
Okay.
My job was to get them there and
get them in one piece.
Get you home.
Understood.
My job was to put them to sleep as soon as they got home.
Sure.
I'll put on Caldara. I'll be out in 10 minutes.
That's right.
So you do this weekly. So what I like about your program is you take on not just state issues, but you take on local and hyper-local issues.
Sure.
And I think, by the way, that's the magic of talk radio.
It is.
We got plenty of talking mouths about what's going on in D.C., but what's going on in the state, what's going on in Colorado Springs.
Right.
So you've lost a lot of good friends being on radio, taking the wrong side of so many issues.
I have. Yeah.
And you're kind of proud of that, aren't you?
I am. I'm real proud. To me, that's really the value of it, right, is to go after people who aren't being principled and to hold them accountable. And if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be in the business.
Right. So when COVID hit, what did you do for the radio? Because I do my show at the studio. I've done the show from the Independence Institute studios. We have a radio station studio. Mm-hmm. I have something at my home that I've been doing for 20 years.
Right.
I had to set it up myself. It was very expensive way back in the day. And now any Yahoo can go get a software package and just start blabbing. But what happened when COVID hit? Did you go into the studio?
Well, I was doing the show from the studio. Did that, just would drive in every Saturday morning and do it, and did that for many years. And then when COVID hit, occasionally I'd be gone before COVID hit, and we'd have to come up with some kind of solution. So I got a software solution that just allowed me to do it from home. And so I just continued to do it from home and had done that all through COVID.
Is it a live show or is it?
It's a live show with call-in guests.
So COVID hits, you've already kind of prepped for it.
Right.
So you're just doing the show at home like everybody else who has a radio show.
Right.
And you can always tell the NPR guys when their cat's meowing in the back. It's like, yeah, they've got cats.
That's right.
All right, so
all NPR guys have cats.
They have to. As a matter of fact, it's a part of their job. They're given one. So great. Who owns the station you work at?
So Cumulus Media owns KVOR, which is the station that I was on.
And this is just another one of the radio conglomerates.
Yeah.
You've got Salem, which owns KNUS here. You've got iHeart, which is the big one. They own close to 1,000 stations, plus venues and recording and all music venues. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones out there, but Cumulus is a big player.
I think over 600 stations across the country. A big player in the radio business, you bet.
Now, I've found working for iHeart over the years. Well, before that, it was Clear Channel. Before that, it was JCOR, but things get gobbled up.
Right.
That they get more and more bureaucratic the bigger and bigger
Right.
they get.
Yeah.
And you lose some of the magic of that WKRP kind of vibe. Same thing with Cumulus?
Yeah, I think so. They get a little more corporate-y, and before long that starts dictating everything that you do, and you do lose a little bit of the flavor of local radio.
But I mean, we still do it, and I'm glad iHeart does it. I'm glad Salem does it. I'm glad Cumulus does it.
Right.
So what happened, dude? You quit.
Well,
or you got fired. I don't know which way to.
Well, I don't know either.
Yeah.
I don't either what happened. No, they came back after. So for 15 months, essentially, I did my show from home, and everything worked fine. Everybody did it from home. In fact, we were told, don't come into the studio, just do it from home. And then
everybody's thinking, why are we paying for these studios?
That's right. Why are we paying for the studios? Then all of a sudden, they slowly said, hey, if you want to come back to work, you have to be fully vaccinated. Both shots of one of the vaccines. And several people decided to go back. I had already had COVID. And so in talking with my doctor, he said, you really don't need the vaccine right now. You have the antibodies. For now, you're good. Maybe sometime later I'll advise it. And I like to take my medical advice from my doctor who examines me, not from a CEO of a company.
And the doctor that examined you got his degree in some Caribbean island that his parents sent him to.
Yeah, I don't think so.
This was an actual doctor.
This was an actual doctor. His name was not Fauci, but he is an actual doctor.
So it wasn't just an ED doctor. This was not just your erectile dysfunction doctor.
No,
this was an actual doctor.
He is not. Yeah.
Which is interesting because everyone seems to think, well, the science. We're going to let the science lead on this. Well, science is somewhat interpretive when it comes to medical issues, and I just want to make sure I got the facts straight. You had COVID.
I did.
All right. People who have COVID have built up probably the best immunities there are to it because it's the actual virus. Doesn't mean you're not going to get it again. Doesn't mean you're not going to get a variant of it, but chances are whatever you get, it's going to be a lot less.
Right.
So he said, "Don't get the shot."
Yeah.
And you trust this guy?
Yeah, I do. I trust my doctor. And again, I'm not anti-vaccine. In fact, I've had the flu vaccine. Just had that a couple of weeks ago. If my doctor suggested that I get it, I think I would get it. My wife has been vaccinated, so it's not like we're anti-vaxxers.
So you're not worried about getting microchipped. You're not worried about the conspiracies. You're not worried about this. It's just purely a medical decision.
Right.
I'm going to take my doctor's advice.
Right. Instead of the CEO or Dr. Fauci, who's never examined me. And it is frustrating that so many people, so many medical professionals, and the CDC and others are ignoring the fact, right, that people who have had COVID certainly have some kind of immunity. We just ignore it. We don't talk about it. And that's so many Americans that if you count that and you allowed those people to go back into the workforce, our economy would be doing a lot better. It'd be roaring a little bit better now.
Right. So I don't want to stress this point, but it seems pretty obvious. You were not going in to the building.
Right.
Were you planning to go into the building?
No.
Were you like, hell or high water?
No.
Jeff Crank is going into that building to spread death and disease.
Right. John, I was a contractor for him. At one point, I was an employee, but I became a contractor, had been in a contractor status for several years, doing the show from my home, Saturday mornings, all through.
Wait. They pay you?
They paid me.
Oh, I gotta figure
Can you believe that?
I gotta figure
You got to figure that gig out.
You
got to figure a gig like that out. So
they pay me. They just underpay me.
Well, of course they underpay me too. Yeah, but we all think we're underpaid. But I was doing that, and all of a sudden they came to me and said, "Can't do that anymore. We need you to be an employee." And I said, "Well, if I became an employee, wouldn't that make me be under this vaccine mandate?" And they said, "Well, yes, it would." I said, "Well, I don't want to be under the vaccine mandate. Can I just keep doing this as a contractor?" And they said, "No, we've decided that anybody who has a regular show has to be an employee under an employee status. Now, if you just came in and guest hosted, we could let you do that. But no, you have to do it." Well, that felt to me like they wanted to be able to make me an employee so that they could regulate whether or not I had it. And frankly, it's going to make, if they're going to make me come into the studio, doesn't that, and I'm not coming in now, doesn't that increase my risk of either getting COVID from an employee or giving it to someone?
Right.
It makes no sense at all.
So if you were an employee,
yeah,
would you continue to do your show at home?
I would like to if they would have let me, but they wouldn't let me do that. They wanted me to come back into the studio and be an employee.
All right. See, something happens when bureaucracy starts to grow. You start managing by policy instead of common sense. And so here's a guy who does one show a week.
Right.
And it's just fine. People like it. He likes it. It adds value to the community. It checks a box on community service for your FCC license. Everything's great. So let's screw this up and force you to have the shot.
Right.
Why didn't you just get the shot?
Well,
come on, man. Let me do my best, Joe. But come on, man.
Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Well, I didn't get the shot because there was much more at stake. And as I've said many times, I'm not anti-vaccine, but I am anti-tyranny. And to me, it felt like tyranny, right? To come and tell people who have already gone to their doctor and had this discussion with their doctor, and their doctor says, for right now, you don't need the vaccine. But yet I'm supposed to do it because a CEO in Atlanta decides that I need to do it.
Right. And who cares more about your health? The CEO in Atlanta?
Right.
Or the doctor you've got to look at in the eyes?
Yeah.
How many times have you met the CEO of Cumulus?
0.
Yeah.
And I go to my doctor regularly.
Right. Let me try this on, because you and I both kind of work in the world of where ideas meet real world.
Right.
It's different. It's one thing when the government says, we're going to give you this shot.
Right.
Fine, ring the bell of tyranny. I understand what you're saying. But if it's your employer, isn't that just another thing to say, no, if you want to work here, you gotta hit the dress code, you gotta shave your beard, you can't wear that outfit, you gotta wear this outfit, and you have to get vaccinated. Mm-hmm. It's not tyranny because it's just a private company.
Yeah. Well, and I know a lot of people make that argument, and I think that's a pretty slippery slope, because a company that tells you must get vaccinated and they have the legal authority to do that is also a company, I suppose, that could tell you must take birth control, that you must have your tubes tied, that you must have this surgery or that surgery. I mean, where does that all stop? And so to me, I look at it.
You understand, right now people are watching us, listening to us, and they're rolling their eyes, go, oh yeah. See these right-wing cranks, which is why you chose the name you did.
That's right.
Giving you the vaccine is like forcing birth control into your system.
Right.
Again, I implore you, come on, man. Is that a fair jump?
Well, I think it is a fair jump, and I think what companies like Cumulus are finding out, what the president's finding out with truck drivers and other folks, right, is that people can still walk. This is still a country where you can go somewhere else and you can work. And as long as that's an option, then, Cumulus is going to make their decision. I'll make my decision. And, I don't argue so much about whether they have the authority to do it. I think it's wrong.
I might argue if they have the authority.
Yeah.
In that, I believe the individual is from the skin in, which is, fine, you want me to wear your goofy little uniform when I'm working at Burger King?
Sure.
I'll wear your goofy little uniform and you can fire me if I don't. If I don't dress the right way for the dress code, fine, that's my skin out. I get that. But when it comes to my religion, when it comes to my sexual orientation, when it comes to what's inside my body, that it seems as though we have protections to say, well, we're not going to discriminate you because you got a fake hip. We're not going to discriminate against you because your skin color, in. We're not going to discriminate against you because of your sex or what you do in bed. And all these things seem like, all right, government says you can discriminate on a whole bunch of areas, which is a good thing. Discrimination's not a bad word. We're all discriminating. But on these things, you can't. And it seems to me your medical choices is as close to who you are as your religion.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, John. And I think the Supreme Court's going to have to ultimately decide this, right? But I think even beyond that, so I agree with you, and I think I called their policy immoral, and I think it is immoral to try and force people to choose between feeding their family and obeying their dictate as opposed to their medical advice from their doctor.
All right, so you went this crazy route. Now they're going to force me to take birth control, which, by the way, you should take birth control. I don't need any more of you around.
Thank you.
Let me do the other side, which is, oh my God, these crazy people, they're not going to take their vaccine. We can handle this thing with COVID, but if it's the plague, those of us of a certain age have that ridiculous circular mark there for...
You do, I don't. So it must be a difference in age.
Right there. I forget what it was even for, but everybody...
Polio, wasn't it?
I think it was polio or something.
Yeah.
And they shot you with this
I read about it in the history books.
In the history books. Back with the big war. I remember the big war. And so they're going to say, listen, just because one person or a group of people decide they don't want to do it, they're putting the whole country, the whole world, a shame. Polio is kind of a perfect example that this is a crippling thing that we have, for the most part, destroyed through vaccination, making sure that you have to be vaccinated. I want to send my kid to school. I got to give them a proof of vaccine.
Right. Did they vaccinate people who had already had polio?
I don't know.
I don't believe that they did. Now, I could be wrong about that. But that's my point. This whole thing has been so politicized that it's all about...
But answer the argument that, if it's for polio, was it the right thing? I don't know if they mandated it or not. I would imagine you want to get it. But was it the right thing if they did mandate it? Because now it's a thing of the past, something that that destroyed every generation in history. Within the last 100 years, went into the ether because people got the vaccine and were forced to if they didn't want to.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a fair point. There's no question about that. And again, I think the Supreme Court is going to decide that. But what we're talking about here, I think, is not whether the government mandates that. It's whether a private company has the right to tell you have to have this certain medical procedure in order to work here. And to me, that's very different.
The other part of it that I find a really chicken way of doing this is these unfunded mandates of, listen, when it came to polio, and by the way, I need to fact check this because I could be wrong. If the government said, everybody's going to get this vaccine, newborn kids are going to get this vaccine because we're going to eradicate it and that's going to be that, fine, the elected officials, your government, they made that choice. Here, they made the choice, but they're not the cops.
Right.
Cumulus is the cop.
Sure.
Any company with more than 100 people are supposed to do their job and make sure everybody gets a poke.
Right. And for them, they sort of gladly go along with it. And it's pretty hard to resist the mandates. If you even look at the Biden mandate, it's just easier to tell your employees, get the vaccination. It will allow for testing. It will allow for a few things like that. But if you're an employer, it's just easier and cheaper to say, go get the vaccine.
Yeah, because really, I'm going to swab your nose 3 times a week, and do the paperwork for that.
Right. And John, the whole point of getting the vaccine was so that we could get back to normal. I thought that if you got vaccinated, the point was you didn't have to worry about whether you're sitting next to me and I'm unvaccinated or not. That was the point of this.
Yeah, I'm vaccinated.
Sure.
And I was worried about my son who was Downs, and I was wanting to make sure he got vaccinated. And I'm glad I did. When I got COVID, I got it in between the 2 shots. It wasn't very hard for me. It didn't kill me. It wasn't that big of a deal at all. I don't know if it was because of that shot or if I was one of the lucky ones that it didn't affect that much. And you hear it both ways. I'm glad I had it. Great. But the idea, I got it because I don't know if you have COVID. And I want to hang out with you. So if you have COVID and I've got the vaccine, what do I care? That's why I got the vaccine.
Sure, right.
It seemed to be the perfect, you do you, I do me.
Right.
And now they're saying, well, you can have the vaccine and be a carrier. So now, I'm the bad guy because I went off and got the vaccine.
Yeah.
It's an endless loop of silliness.
Yeah, it is, and endless loop of silliness. And I think it foreshadows a whole another issue of medical exemptions, religious exemptions. There are some people who think you shouldn't even have that anymore. It shouldn't be an option. And when you start saying we require it of the polio vaccine, well, what about religious freedom? What about somebody who chooses not to do that? Should they still have that right? And I think when companies are doing this, they're not as full of concern about that, right? About your religious or your medical exemption.
Like your situation, it sure didn't seem religious to you.
No.
It didn't seem like you wanted that you have a medical reason not to do it. That is,
other than I have antibodies.
Yeah, other than your doctor said you don't have to. But it's not. I've known some people who've had reactions.
Sure.
I knew of someone who died of cancer and he was doing well. There was some suspicion whether the vaccine helped speed something up. I don't know.
Right.
You'll never know. But somebody like that who would say, no, the doctor says because of this condition, the vaccine will be bad for you. Mm-hmm. Here, it's like you just don't need it. So it's not a religious exemption. It's not really a medical exemption. It's just leave me the hell alone exemption.
Right. Sure.
And I shouldn't have to have an exemption to be left the hell alone.
Sure. And I said it's immoral, but I also think that the free market solution to this is pretty simple, right? Like Cumulus made their decision, I made mine. What happens when trucking companies say, we got a vaccine mandate, you got to do it, and they lose, 500,000 truckers decide they're just not going to do it anymore. They'll go work for a different company. What happens?
I've known of a lot of teachers in different states who said, I got to move out of the state now.
Right.
They've got a mandate. I'm not doing that. And I get part of it. This vaccine isn't even a year old. Mm-hmm. All right. It was rushed. It doesn't have the decades of testing that the flu shot that you have is. I feel very comfortable with it, but I get if somebody says, no, I don't want to, I'm not ready for that.
Right.
It's your body. And what blows my mind is that a lot of the same people who say, my body, my choice, when it comes to abortion, are saying, your body, my choice.
Right.
And it doesn't seem to jive.
Yeah.
I square it with what's going on in Colorado. We have some of the worst cases of COVID right now, or at least emergency room capacity. The governor is getting pressured to bring back a mask mandate statewide because some crazy districts won't do it.
Yeah. Well, first of all,
if only you got your damn vaccine, we wouldn't have to worry about this.
Well, first of all, I think that the evidence is clear and the verdict's in on masks. Masks don't work. And if you look at mask mandates...
I so disagree with you.
Do you?
Well, I know when I see somebody coming into the restaurant and they put on the mask for that 15-foot walk and then take it off, I know that it was the 15 feet that were the most dangerous. But once he sits down to eat, he's fine then.
Sure.
It's the walking.
Yeah.
So here's my prediction.
Yes.
Pardon me for going off track.
Sure.
You know how people sneeze and you say Gesundheit or God bless you?
Right.
And, Mom, why do we say that? And get whack on the back. Because it's good manners.
Right.
50 years from now, all right, put on your masks, your ceremonial masks as we go to the table in the restaurant. Mom, why do we do it? Whack, because it's good manners. I don't know why we do it. It's just what you do. I'm pretty sure.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. I think that's right. I don't know what will happen in Colorado. Actually, I've seen Governor Polis. He seems more cautious to impose a mask mandate now than he did at the beginning of this, when he was saying that we needed 600 ventilators, and I think we needed less than 3 or 4.
When he took the convention center and turned it into a makeshift hospital.
Right, yeah.
And by the way, I can have some grace on that. You don't know what you're dealing with. I kind of get that.
But I want to give him some credit on that, because I do think he's better now. He realizes there's an economic cost to doing that. Unlike Governor Whitmer in in Michigan and some of these other governors. But I would just say, I mean, if you look at the death statistics for COVID, the deaths per million people, it's really not different between Michigan and Colorado and Florida and Georgia. It's about 2,000 people per million. And so I just don't think mask.
Doesn't the governor have a point when he says, listen, everybody nearly everyone who's in COVID in an ICU is unvaccinated? That's a pretty convincing argument to get vaccinated, isn't it? I do notice he doesn't say how many of them already had COVID and recovered, like you.
Or how many of them have comorbidities or anything like that. They're sort of cherry picking the data when they say that.
Still, but still, if you're not vaccinated.
Yeah. Though I've been hearing more and more that there are a lot of people who are vaccinated who are now showing up in hospitals too. Look, I think there's no doubt that if you get vaccinated, it reduces your risk of probably getting hospitalized or death from COVID. I would also say, which for some reason the medical community won't accept, if you've already had COVID and you have antibodies, that you probably are at greatly reduced risk too. So,
can we then have some sort of card that says, I've had COVID? Don't ask me for my vaccine. I've had COVID. Let me into the bar and restaurant.
You would think so.
By the way, I also find it just delightful that you need to have a card that says you're vaccinated and proof of ID to get into a bar now. But to vote, that would be racist.
That's racism to do that.
That is voter suppression right there to ask for an ID.
Maybe we have to figure out a way to put voting and vaccinations at the same place. And then they get their card and then we know who they are. See?
Not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea.
Personal. So now that you're not doing the radio, how are you going to get your pearls of wisdom out to the 12 people who listen to you every Saturday morning?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I've never had pearls of wisdom, but I have nuggets occasionally. I'm still doing a podcast. People can go to jeffcrank.com. They can find it there. It's also on all podcast platforms. So it's on Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts and all that fun stuff. And it's been really kind of interesting to see how much, and John, you'll know that you'll understand this, having been on the radio. There's this bond that you have with listeners, right? And I got tons of emails when I stopped doing the show from people. One from a very sweet lady who said her and her husband of 30 years have listened to me since the beginning. They did it every Saturday morning. He passed away 5 years ago, and she said, for the last 5 years, I've continued to listen to you because you were the connection to my husband. I mean, brings tears to your eyes when you think about that impact that
when I did KOA, and I did late night, which was great.
I listened to you all the time.
Yeah, because it would blast everywhere in the country.
Yes.
Late night. The best part about doing late night radio is that the program directors are in bed. So they just leave you alone. They don't care about drive time. So and I would run into people who were younger folks and said, you really changed my life. I never thought the way I thought. You changed the way I think about this, and this.
Right.
And I was like, wow. And then, some of the guys who hang out with you, you get to know them.
Yeah.
Rick from Centennial, who passed away for 20 years.
Right.
He'd call in regularly. We met a couple times. It really is something different and local. And I really miss as that changes. I don't know what it's going to morph to. It'll morph towards something. Well,
I think podcasting really, is the future. And I was fortunate enough 2 or 3 years ago, I kind of saw that. And I asked Cumulus if I could own my podcast and take it. I put it on a different platform. And I actually grew it over time while I was still on, doing the radio show. So I left with that podcast base, and it's growing. I've been doing it for about a month now where it's not been on air, but it's podcast. It's just going to take time and effort and continuing to grow and put marketing dollars towards it and things like that. So,
well, thanks for bringing COVID into our beautiful studios.
You're welcome.
And best of luck.
You're perfectly fine.
Don't touch me. Don't touch me.
You're perfectly
fine.
Don't touch me.
Don't touch me.
John.
Jeff, thanks so much.
You bet, John. Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.